West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I want to be 100% clear. Now, not later, not sometime in the future. Now, we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Yes.
It needs to be signed into law, and we also need to pass H.R. 1. Our citizens can't wait any longer. And I want to echo what our majority whip here in the U.S. House, Jim Clyburn, talked about when he mentioned a carve-out for H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
We really want to drill down on the importance of the Democratic leader Clyburn's comments about a carve-out on the filibuster with respect to voting rights. If you can have a carve-out for a right-wing Supreme Court justice, why can't you have a carve-out to protect the very fundamentals of our democracy?
Democrats from the Texas state legislature dramatically left the state of Texas yesterday to block Republicans from passing another draconian anti-voting rights bill in that state. More than 50 Democratic Texas legislators are now in Washington and planning to be there for weeks out of the reach of Texas law enforcement. As long as they stay away, the legislature back home in Texas can't pass anything because there aren't enough legislators there to have a quorum. In the midst of that difficult standoff, Texas Democrats from the state legislature spoke today at the U.S. Capitol alongside members of Congress from Texas. They're basically begging for federal help, urging Democrats in Congress to carve out, to amend the rules of the United States Senate so the Senate can pass voting rights legislation with just the Democratic majority. The Texas state representative you saw speaking there about changing the rules for a right-wing Supreme Court justice, that's true. The filibuster isn't something that's, existed since the Constitution. It's a relatively recent invention, and it has changed a lot, including in recent years, as there have been carve-outs from the filibuster rule for all sorts of things, including judicial nominees, Supreme Court justices, cabinet nominees. There's all sorts of things the filibuster used to apply to that it doesn't anymore. Why not voting rights? It's within Democrats' power to make that change. Now, you heard them name-checking South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn there. This weekend, Congressman Clyburn very publicly called on President Biden to endorse this idea, to endorse the idea of a carve-out for the filibuster for voting rights, so Democrats can get a bill on his desk to protect the right to vote. Congressman Clyburn said, quote, "I don't care whether he does it in a microphone or on the telephone. Just do it." Joining us now is James Clyburn, South Carolina Congressman, the majority whip in the House of Representatives. Congressman, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for making time to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, Rachel.
I know that you pick your fights carefully and that you don't jump into every fight willy-nilly, and you know your power with this administration and you know your power in Washington. Can you talk to us about the decision to make this public call on President Biden that he needs to endorse a change in this rule so voting rights can pass with just 50 votes?
Well, as you just mentioned, I said when I made my statement that you don't have to get in front of a microphone in order to do the kind of negotiations, to make the kind of endorsement that need to be made. You can do it on the telephone. And I do believe that this is the kind of issue that need to be going one-on-one with. And I'm pleased to hear the Vice President, to whom the President has given this responsibility, is in fact having those discussions with members of the Senate. Because we all know that the filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's not a law. It's a tradition. And traditions means the past. In order for us to look to the future, we must begin to look at what is necessary for this great country to continue its movement towards perfection. That's what we're all about. Not a perfect country, but a country in search of perfection. And we need to do that by voting rights, be it H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voter Advancement Act.
Congressman Clyburn, I know that you are close with the President, and I know that you've said that you've spoken directly with Vice President Harris about this. I know you've also, over the course of this voting rights fight, spoken directly and done some work with Senator Joe Manchin, the centrist West Virginia senator who has been such a fulcrum on this point. The question of what he's willing to do and how he's willing to approach this has become potentially determinative in terms of whether or not the Democrats in the Senate are able to actually act. How open is the door that you are pushing on here? How much resistance is there to this idea? How strong are the arguments that are being made against the kind of reform that you're talking about?
Well, I have had extensive conversations with Joe Manchin. I like Joe Manchin. We've been friends for a long time. We used to do a lot of these kinds of shows together, just like I did with Joe Biden. So both of us have developed a great deal of patience with each other. And so I think that Joe has made me a little bit sensitive to the filibuster. I used to want to get rid of the whole thing. But he has convinced me that there's a place for extended debate on legislative issues. I am hopeful that I can convince him that we ought to treat constitutional issues the same way we treat budget issues. We move the budget forward without this filibuster application so as not to threaten the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we ought to move forward on constitutional issues when it comes to the filibuster. So the filibuster, I think, has its place, but not when it comes to voting and other constitutional issues. So we'll see where we go from here. I am hopeful that Joe Manchin will do what I know that he's capable of doing, and that is the right thing.
Hearing you say that you are hopeful about that is going to change a lot of people's, I think, sense of despair on this issue. I think a lot of people very worried about democracy and very worried about voting rights have felt like that this is an impasse, that there's no way around. Hearing you talk about those conversations, hearing you express hope on this issue, hearing you be so specific in terms of what you'd like the president and vice president to do, it feels like a path.
It is Wednesday, the 14th of July of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce. And also, a nod to those meddlesome priests out there that we need to, let them meddle somewhere outside the halls of power. Yes. Well, the Pope got released from his medical procedure, and he's recovering in the Vatican right now. And I think In fact, I know the Pope would be the first to admit that science saved him. Science! And no amount of praying, whether upon bended knee or however your point of view is, saved him. Science did. And he's pretty much made a papal proclamation that get the vaccine. And the poor should also, get some medical care. Medicare for all. Please. Well, I guess that's something that we'll have to pray for. But science saved the Pope. And I guess since he's a commie, extremist left, that's why he's saying that science, probably saved him. Probably science did. And we will be speaking about, the not only anti-science, anti-intellectual tendencies of our nation, but actual anti-science. I have no idea. Is it because they want to kill people? Or are they just so goddamn ignorant they're falling back into superstition? Carl Sagan was right. If you come across that Carl Sagan interview with both Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson, you pick those up back in the 70s, 80s or so. Very pertinent that this anti-intellectual tendency in our society from the very beginning and before, shall I add, because even though the founders, quote, quote, were members of the Enlightenment, there was a lot of people who were not. Let's be clear. Sort of like now. There was still a fight to overcome the superstition of people's ignorance, or the ignorance of their superstition. Which came first? Chicken and egg. Anyway, the Pope is the first one that will tell you science. The Catholic Church have been practicing science for a long time, okay? Way before they put Galileo under house arrest. Jeez. Okay. We wouldn't have a lot of the fruits that we have right now if it wasn't for, grafting and things that people might consider to be science. Alrighty. Well, so as I mentioned, we're going to be delving into a Scopes trial is coming up, I think is what's going to be happening. Man, do they want to kill people or are they just ignorant? I don't know. Maybe it's both. They're ignorant and they want all of those people, like the eggheads, if they would just die and leave us alone. All right. Well, you know what they say. If you F around, you'll find out. And science saved the Pope. And science can save you, too. And I don't mean you, but I mean the rhetorical you of those people out there who are still, I think they're bots. They have to be bots. Maybe trolls, but I believe they're bots. Just coming out of the woodwork, pushing the anti-vax theme, freedom, and all this other BS. And what's next? I don't know. Maybe we'll have bots that will say that, voting is critical race theory, and we cannot have that. Well, I believe that's probably where we're going and where we are. All righty. So what's on the rest of the menu here? Since we do have a curated show for you today, as we do every day. And sometimes the rants are just rantingly going off, and sometimes, I got to rein it in. Today, we're reining it in. At the top, of course, Representative Clyburn is hopeful that Senator Joe Manchin will see the wisdom of scrapping the filibuster for voting rights, but he and Sinema may be kicking and screaming. They may be brought along, but they'll be kicking and screaming since we already have audio of both of them being in the pockets of, dark money. On the rest of the menu, a judge blocked Maryland Governor Larry Hogan from ending congressional-approved extended unemployment benefits. And that's good because they were federally guaranteed. Come on, Larry. A scary jet fuel shortage could ground firefighting aircraft during what could be a ferocious wildfire season. And Tennessee not only fired its top vaccination chief for knowing state law, the state has also halted outreach programs for all vaccinations of all diseases. Vaccinations not allowed in Tennessee. I guess somebody's got a franchise on a bunch of iron lungs. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Dutch COVID infections rose by 500% in a week. We are not out of the woods. California is recording now, I believe, 1,000 infections a day. And when we get to the weather, since COVID is now part of the weather report, at least here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, our own little county in Southern Oregon has seen a precipitous jump. Precipitous? And UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore announced her resignation to care for her husband, who is suffering from a serious health issue. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and Kelly will be at Netroots Nation, and that's coming up. Like this weekend, next weekend, I got to check. Boy, time is flying. I have been quite busy with, medical issues for my mom. And, I guess I can tell people, but, my daughter-in-law has taken ill, and she has another surgery today, had her gallbladder taken out yesterday, and now, they're doing another procedure that's part of all that procedure. So, that sucks. I mean, she's only in her 40s. It's not right. Anyway, the kids are a bit worried. She will be on the mend. And, these are almost outpatient techniques that they do now. My God. So, anyway, hopefully she'll be mending at home, and the kids will give her the proper care, and and her mom's around too. So it's not as if, and my ex lives there too. We've all been part of the raising of all these grandkids. Yikes. So anyway, my attention has been split during the day, and we've been quite busy indeed. So, but I need to find out when Netroots Nation is starting this month. So it's coming up. Maybe the 21st. I got to look at the calendar. So anyway, thank you, Kelly, for monitoring the chat room. And most importantly, thank you for being at Netroots Nation this year. I don't believe there's an actual radio or media row. COVID did some of that. And anyway, we will have reports and recorded podcasts for later. So thank you, Kelly. If you out there in the listening world would now look across the page, our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, it puts a big dent in us being able to pay our bills and continue this resistance around the world. It's not just a Nazi takeover in America, but around the world, and we're not going to allow it. No, we won't. And we hope that we're entertaining in the process, too. You know, need a few laughs, a few considerations about the meaning of it all. Anyway, thank you for your generosity in allowing us to do this for the last 10 years and counting. And we would be truly unable to do it without you, so thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because Tom takes care of it, and he made it simple. Go to @Netroots Radio. How simple is that? Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes and then post that link on Twitter so that you can go look at the show notes and the links. And I also post it on other social media platforms, and you know who they are. You can also follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They are everywhere. Everywhere. Okay. I need to assure you, we even though we get folks that send us the equivalent of an espresso type coffee drink and sometimes more, we aren't quite monetize this operation in the traditional prosperity gospel way. No, we haven't. But though we be small, we be mighty. Yes, indeed. All right, enough of that self-aggrandizing BS. Yes, indeed. Emily Singer brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Unemployed workers in Maryland will continue to get a $300 boost to their weekly unemployment payments after a judge in Baltimore ruled on Tuesday morning, yesterday, that the state's Republican governor, Larry Hogan, must continue to pay them. Baltimore City Circuit Judge Lawrence Fletcher Hill wrote in his decision that Hogan shall immediately take all actions necessary to ensure that Maryland residents continue to receive any and all expanded and or supplemental unemployment benefits available to Maryland residents under the CARES Act, the ARPA, or any other existing federal source of unemployment benefits to the fullest extent allowed under Title 8 of the Labor and Employment Article of the Maryland Code. I guess this will be appealed. Congress in March extended a federal increase in weekly unemployment payments until September 6 to aid workers who lost their jobs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. $300 in Maryland. That's collecting generational wealth, isn't it? No, it's not. But Hogan was one of a number of Republican governors who announced an end to the federal boost to unemployment payments. The GOP governors claimed that the increase in unemployment insurance payments were disincentivizing unemployed workers from searching for jobs. No, they were still looking for jobs. They just wanted something that paid better than a pittance so that they didn't have to take food stamps to get a job. Well, these federal programs provided temporary important relief. Vaccines and jobs are now in good supply, Hogan said in a statement at the time, and I'm just making up an accent for him because we do that here. And we have a critical problem where businesses across our state are trying to hire more people, but many are facing severe worker shortages. After 12 consecutive months of job growth, we look forward to getting more Marylanders back to work. For nothing, we might add. I think the workers want to work for something, not for nothing anymore. Some economists have said, however, that it is not unemployment payments that are primarily keeping workers from finding jobs. They say other factors, such as lack of child care or high child care costs, are keeping workers at home. WBAL-TV reported that Maryland's own Department of Labor economist Michael Sears even testified during a hearing about whether Hogan could cancel a payment that many workers cite lack of child care or fear of contracting COVID-19, and not the added unemployment payments in their reasons for not going back to work. The economy has continued to improve as more people get vaccinated against COVID-19, which has allowed states to end some pandemic restrictions. In June, the economy added 850,000 jobs, beating economists' expectations and signaling that the economy is getting back on track. Keith Riddler of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Airport officials facing jet fuel shortages are concerned they'll have to wave off planes and helicopters that drop fire retardants during what could be a ferocious wildfire season, potentially endangering surrounding communities. Sporadic shortages at some tanker bases in Oregon and Utah have already been reported. The worry is that multiple bases go dry simultaneously during what is shaping up to be a very busy wildfire season in the U.S. West. Tanker bases in Arizona, where many large fires are burning, have also had jet fuel supply issues in the last month. We're talking about the United States of America here, folks. We haven't run into that before, said Jessica Gardetto, a National Interagency Fire Center spokesman in Boise, Idaho, and a former wildland firefighter. It is a scary thought, with all the shortages going on right now. It's not clear if jet fuel supplies and delivery systems can be bolstered in time for this wildfire season to avoid potential problems keeping firefighting aircraft aloft if multiple large fires break out around the West. Airport officials, aviation supply companies, and jet fuel transport companies said jet fuel demand declined sharply and supply chains atrophied during the coronavirus pandemic. They have yet to bounce back in the western U.S., even as the economy zooms ahead, and more passengers flock to airports for long delayed trips. Now, wait a second. You're telling me that jet fuel's going to go to commerce instead of fighting wildfires? Just say it. Now, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, jet fuel supplied in the U.S. in 2020 fell 38% compared to 2019 pre-pandemic levels. Jet fuel demand has increased about 26% since the start of this year, though it has not reached 2019 levels. The administration's weekly petroleum status report for July shows demand at 78% of 2019 levels. That is up from 44% of 2019 levels for the same period in 2020, when the pandemic had taken hold. Overall, the administration said jet fuel inventories in the U.S. are at or above the 5-year average, except for the Rocky Mountains, where they are 1% below. That appears to point to the supply chain as the potential problem, various industry officials said. COVID. It lulled everybody to sleep, said Mark Haynes, vice president of sales for Ann Arbor, Michigan-based AvFuel Corporation, which supplies jet fuel across the U.S., including to about half of the nation's 44 air tanker bases operated by the U.S. Forest Service or the U.S. Bureau of Land Management in western states. Some states also maintain tanker bases. Our business went to about zero, Haynes said. A lot of trucking companies had to lay off jet fuel drivers. What happened with the opening up of the U.S., demand for leisure travel has boomed. And so they're going to send the jet fuel for leisure travel, knowing that we have had tremendously severe fire seasons for how many seasons now? Hundreds of aircraft are used to fight wildfires each year. Most of the nation's large retardant bombers are jets. Turboprop retardant bombers also use jet fuel. They lay down strips of red fire retardant ahead of approaching flames in support of ground crews who are more likely to hold a fire line after a retardant bomber has made a drop. Most firefighting helicopters also use the jet fuel that authorities worry could be in short supply for aerial wildfire operations going forward. Jonathan Matisse of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Tennessee's former top vaccinations official said that she could not stay silent after she was fired this week amid scrutiny from Republican state lawmakers over her department's outreach efforts to vaccinate teenagers against COVID-19. Dr. Michelle Fiscus, who was the medical director for vaccine preventable diseases and immunization programs at the Tennessee Department of Health, said the state's elected leaders put politics over the health of children by firing her for her efforts to get more Tennesseans vaccinated. She said, the agency presented her with a letter of resignation and a letter of termination on Monday, but no reason for why she was being let go. After choosing the termination letter, Fiscus penned a blistering 1,200-word response in which she said she is ashamed of Tennessee's leaders, afraid for her state, and angry for the amazing people of the Tennessee Department of Health who have been mistreated by an uneducated public and leaders who have only their own interests in mind. She also revealed that the Tennessee Department of Health has halted all outreach efforts around any kind of vaccines for children, not just COVID-19 ones, which the Tennessean confirmed through department documents. All of it, she warned, comes as only 38% of Tennesseans are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, lagging behind much of the nation. So far, Republican Governor Bill Lee's administration has been silent on the firing. His office and the health department declined to comment, citing personnel matters. After an event yesterday, Tuesday, Lee did not answer questions from reporters. Well, they are a death cult, aren't they? Let's go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Suddenly Soderbergh. So what sticks in my head to say about No Sudden Move, Steven Soderbergh's latest film, is that, refreshingly, it feels like a movie. And that's probably for two reasons. One, No Sudden Move squarely comes from a classic Hollywood tradition, film noir. Kirk Goins is a mid-level crook in 1954 Detroit. He's fresh out of jail when a mystery boss hires him into a three-man crew. Their job is to hold hostage the family of an auto exec who's planning some industrial espionage. The new plan is this guy must now do his espionage for the benefit of whomever it is Goins and crew are working for. Plans go awry, hidden motives are revealed, people are betrayed, and Goins, followed by fellow crook Ronald Russo, must work out how to stay alive and how to score the elusive big payday. Antiheroes, a corrupt world, twists and turns, a MacGuffin, a money hunt, film noir. 2. Soderbergh, like many other directors I admire, makes consistent stylistic choices in his films. Let's talk about two of them. Character focus and complex plots. By design, Soderbergh and screenwriter Ed Solomon do not give you everything you need to know up front. You pick up facts as the film progresses. In fact, in a very real way, you don't learn what's driving No Sudden Move until the postscript. The postscript! That tight control of information puts us close to the characters, and what actors we have playing these characters. Benicio del Toro, David Harbour, John Hamm, plus another half dozen names, and anchoring the film, Don Cheadle. Cast to play to their strengths as opposed to just playing their types, these stars get to stretch their acting chops a bit. Now, all the main women characters are either girlfriends or wives, but that's another 2 minutes. Yeah, so my whole it feels like a movie thing probably says more about my biases than anything else, but also it's because No Sudden Move is just visually rich and conceptually interesting with good writing and strong performances. Isn't that what you want a movie to be? This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Vitak. What if you could create household objects, say biogarments, kitchen appliances, or blinds and curtains that powered themselves using the sun, were fully recyclable, 100% biodegradable, sequestered carbon just by existing, filtered toxins out of the air, and were also alive? Dr. Maria Abentam at Delft University and a postdoc researcher in her lab, Dr. Srikan Balasubramanian, have gotten one step closer to making that a reality. They've created a 3D printed photosynthetic material made out of algae. Here is Dr. Abentam.
Yeah, we were interested in a 3D printed living material that's made of microalgae. And there were a couple examples of 3D printed algae material already out there, but we were interested in making one that would be enough mechanically robust to be used in real applications, because a lot of these materials are based on hydrogel, which tend to be very fragile.
You might not have heard of hydrogels, but you've certainly used them. Wet disposable baby diapers, chia pudding, toy water beads. All of these are hydrogels that you might have around your house. But hydrogels aren't very strong or solid, so the team wanted to make something better. They already had a 3D printer that they had built in their lab to print materials with bacterial bioink. Bioink is a solution that contains living cells that you load into a 3D printer.
In the lab, we were also studying the microalgae, but for a different purpose. So we were interested in the physics of how it swims and how it moves the flow around itself when it swims.
They had the idea that maybe they could put the two together. They created a bioink out of living microalgae and printed it onto bacterial cellulose, a fibrous material that can be produced by bacteria. It grows as a rubbery film on top of the bacterial cultures, but when it's dried out, it's like a tough paper. The clever part of their method is that the algae bioink won't solidify until it comes into contact with calcium chloride. So they made calcium chloride petri dishes, they put the bacterial paper on top, and then printed directly onto that. That way, when the algae ink is printed, the calcium chloride will diffuse through the paper and cause it to solidify.
It worked actually surprisingly well. When we tried to put the algae inside the living material, almost immediately, I think the first trial, it immediately worked. So we saw that it was very promising. And then, we tried different conditions, different designs, and then we test the mechanical properties of this material.
The bacterial paper stays on the print like a backing and provides the material with more strength than the hydrogel alone would have. It can handle twisting and crushing. The material can survive 3 days on its own and at least a month, probably longer, if fed with nutrients every couple days. It can be kept in light or dark, and it can easily be dissolved, and the algae can be removed and placed right back into the printer to make more material. Or, alternatively, it's fully biodegradable. The printed material won't grow noticeably in volume over time, but the number of cells increase, and so does the amount of chlorophyll. Best of all, this process is relatively inexpensive. Here's Dr. Balasubramanian.
And one biggest advantage of our approach with a 3D printer is that it is really cost effective, because if you consider 3D printers that are already available in the market that can print living cells, they are probably in the price range of $100,000. But our 3D printer is just like less than $250 US. It's like a do-it-yourself 3D printer, so anybody can actually do this printing at home.
And in fact, all the instructions for printing are available in their paper published in the journal Advanced Functional Materials. A previous paper from the group has all the details of how to build the printer, so you really could do it at home. Ultimately, the possibilities with this kind of material are many. From creating synthetic leaves, to producing oxygen for life in outer space, to filtering contaminants out of the air and water, to photosynthetic textiles. But those applications are all still a little ways in the future. The team's proof-of-concept prints were relatively flat, about 10 to 20 layers high, so their next big hurdle is getting height.
Because one of the limitations with our current approach is that in order for the hydrogel to solidify, there needs to be some calcium that diffuse all the way into the print. That limits the height that we can achieve.
But they are already well underway in taking their material to new heights. And some of their prints have even been shipped to a few people's homes, a kind of living material live test. So sun-powered blinds or an apron that sequesters carbon might be a reality sooner than you think. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Vital.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, Show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Why is critical race theory in the political crosshairs? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Critical race theory isn't new. It developed as an intellectual movement by legal scholars beginning in the 1970s, and since then has been embraced by other disciplines. Critical race theory, in broad brushstrokes, focuses on race as a social and historical reality, and racism not so much as individual acts of prejudice, but rather as part of our history and institutions, significantly aided and abetted and institutionalized by law. For example, the United States Constitution counted African American slaves as 3/5 of a person. After the Civil War, the Southern states enacted the Black Codes, intended to perpetuate slavery in a slightly different form. Critics claim that critical race theory is unpatriotic and anti-American, and that it's divisive because it highlights how people of different races have been treated differently throughout the country's history. In 2021, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, Florida, and Texas have banned teaching critical race theory in their schools, and many other states as well are considering similar proposals. Eradicating the history of slavery and racism from our consciousness, our schools, and our history, as if whitewashing the past will somehow better enable young people to better and more realistically face the future? Now there's a really bad theory. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
Exciting news from Wall Street. Our wealth markets are booming. Everything from the Dow Jones average to gold prices are rocketing to new records, showering us with wealth from above. Oh, wait, maybe you're one of the big majority of workaday Americans who don't own stocks or gold, so maybe you're not celebrating Wall Street's big boom. But just chill, because conventional corporate wisdom assures us that the wealthy will invest their good fortunes in enterprises that eventually will produce trickle-down gains for everyone. Excuse my rudeness, but let's take a peek at how those who are reaping today's big buck bonanza are actually investing that wealth. Look at Wall Streeters themselves. The big banks have been making money like bankers, with their stock prices zooming up by 28% just since January. So how are these moneyed elites spending this windfall? Not by making job-creating investments, but by simply giving the money to their big shareholders, including their own top executives, nearly all of whom are already among the richest people on earth. The main way they do this is through a sleight of hand called a stock buyback. The honchos simply cash out the bulk of that 28% increase in the value of the bank's stock price, using that money to repurchase more of their bank's own stock from lesser shareholders. Hocus pocus, this manipulation artificially pumps up the value of the stock these insider shareholders already own, making each of them even richer than rich, although they've done absolutely nothing to earn this increased wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's not a small scam. J.P. Morgan Chase is now sinking $30 billion into buying its own stock. Wells Fargo is shifting $18 billion into the scheme, and Bank of America is throwing $25 billion into its buyback. Wall Street bankers are the biggest robbers in America. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by our new Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. With kick-ass political spark plugs like Beto O'Rourke, musical champions like Marcia Ball, and grassroots change makers like the New Georgia Project and People's Action, the Lowdown Happy Hour is reaching out to you to help put the move in movement. So grab a libation and join the fun. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day municipal workers in Cleveland, Louisville, and Philadelphia walked off the job. That summer was rocked with public sector strikes, starting with a firefighter strike in Memphis. In Cleveland, municipal services came to a virtual halt as city workers honored a police work stoppage. In Louisville, firefighters walked off the job after the Kentucky Labor Relations Board found the city guilty of unfair labor practices. And in Philadelphia, 20,000 AFSCME members, including sanitation, highway, and health department workers, rejected a last-minute contract offer. They demanded wage increases, but they were also furious when the city announced it would have to lay off city workers to pay an arbitration award to the police. Sanitation strikes soon followed in New Orleans, San Antonio, Detroit, and Tuscaloosa. By the third week of July, transit workers in Washington, D.C. staged a wildcat strike, as did postal workers in California and New Jersey. Labor historian Joseph McCartan notes that public sector strikes peaked in 1975 and again in 1978. By the late 1970s, the volatile recipe of rising public sector union militancy, inflation, and anti-tax reform made public sector unions more vulnerable than at any other time. Suddenly, the union became a convenient scapegoat for public officials dealing with declining relative tax revenues, demands for improved public services, and taxpayer unrest. McCartan adds that by 1978, public employers came out swinging in labor disputes. Public sector unions would struggle to hold their own in an increasingly hostile environment as their ability to strike was being severely eroded. The backlash against public sector militancy set the stage for President Reagan's smashing of the PATCO union just 3 years later.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 90 to 93. We'll see how that goes. It looks like we will have abundant sunshine throughout the day. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight. Lows in the upper 50s. Winds out of the northwest increasing to 10 to 15 miles per hour. With sunny skies tomorrow. Highs in the upper 80s. It looks like we're in a cooling trend. Winds continuing out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. We do have an active air advisory, though right now it looks like the air quality index is good at 50 parts per million. But before I get into more of that, confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have increased by about 70, now standing at 118,029 people confirmed infected. Deceased remains at 148. Grass pollen is high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. As I mentioned, that air quality index is good at the high upper reaches of it at 50 parts per million for the region, though the region is in an air quality active warning, which means that you should be inside with filtered air. Right now, in this little microcosm or microclimate, we are okay, but we'll be closing up soon anyway. Daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Slather on the SP50. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 70%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 75 and partly cloudy. Paris is 70 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 92 and fair. Kabul is 80 and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and clear. Tokyo is 77 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Mike Porter of the AP brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Coronavirus infections in the Netherlands skyrocketed by more than 500% over the last week, the country's Public Health Institute reported yesterday, Tuesday. The surge follows the scrapping of almost all remaining lockdown restrictions and the reopening of nightclubs in late June. The weekly update showing that nearly 52,000 people in the Netherlands tested positive for COVID-19 over the past week came a day after caretaker Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte apologized for the June 26th lockdown relaxation and called it an error of judgment. Rutte backtracked Friday and reintroduced some restrictions in an attempt to rein in the soaring infection rate. Bars again have to close at midnight, while discotheques and clubs were shuttered again until at least August 13. The Netherlands, along with other European nations, is facing a rise in infections fueled by the more contagious Delta variant, just as governments hope to greatly ease or eliminate remaining pandemic restrictions during the summer holiday season.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has accepted the resignation of Henrietta Fore as Executive Director of UNICEF with deep regret, praising her inspiring leadership as head of the UN Children's Agency. UN Deputy Spokesman Farhan Haq said yesterday that Guterres fully understands Fore's decision to devote herself to a family health issue. She is married and has 4 children. An American public health and international development executive, Fore, who was the first woman to head the U.S. Agency for International Development, took up the leadership of UNICEF on the 1st of January of 2018. The Secretary General thanked Fore for her outstanding work to address the extraordinary challenges facing children and young people around the world and improving their lives, noting UNICEF's critical role in the global response to COVID-19 and in reimagining education. Fore's previous career included running several companies, serving as director of the U.S. Mint from 2001 to 2005, as U.S. Undersecretary for State for Management from 2005 to 2007, and U.S. Aid Administrator from 2007 to 2009 during the administration of then President George W. Bush. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio does broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.